Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at a review for a game called Talon. Talon. Aren't I talented? Alright, Talon is a game that involves two players, one of which is going to take on the Terran forces against the relatively unknown Talon forces in ship-to-ship combat in a space opera-like setting. It really is two players. It's a interesting game with a premise that you are writing valuable critical information about each of the ships right on the ship token itself to remove a lot of dependency on additional chits and counters. Is it any good? Well, let's take a look. So let's take a look at the components that you get when you purchase a nutritious box of Talon. First off, you get a galactic map, which is basically as simple of a galactic map as you can probably ever imagine. Sturdy, nice, thick, yay! And then you get the game pieces. These are the core pieces of the game. These are the units that each side, the Terrans and the Talon factions have. We'll go over the denotation later, but suffice to say, this is where you'll see all the information for a ship at a glance right on the ship. Very handy. You have the oh so helpful track that kind of basically takes care of how long the game's going, the rounds, the impulses per round, the flow of the game, how you actually play it, and some different helps for when you're playing. Lots of counters, although not an incredible amount of counters, but generally grouped counters, 5 or 6 sets of counters that you'll use and place on your ships during the game. And here's an example of the Talon ships. Oh, look at that. Here's a battleship. I wouldn't want to take that on with a group of fighters. You also get your handy-dandy cheat sheet. This is a nice one-pager that you can probably photocopy and give to everybody that tells you everything you need to know about critical information about the ships, the spaceships, combat tables for what you do when you're firing at something, critical damage, etc. You also there's a mode of the game, sort of an Empire mode, that gives you an opportunity to sort of play across the galaxy. Oh, also, you get a different side map to a half map, and that's interesting because this is meant to be kind of a wraparound map. So if you find yourself maneuvering around too close to the side, you can shift everything over, or also if you can use that half map to kind of like space. There are no limits to space, so that's kind of a nice help. And finally, you get the ever-important rules of play, which honestly isn't that thick. The rules are concise and detailed and very, very well done. And, of course, you get a playbook, although it's not just a playbook. It's actually a playbook. The actual examples of play is probably maybe a third of the book. The rest of it's going over kind of a lot of the different modes of play and a lot of different things, because Talon is really like a lot of stuff inside a single box. That's the components breakdown. Now let's get into an example of play. So before we begin, I'm going to actually go over a couple basic things that are important to understand about Talon, because you may be used to the kind of approach of games like X-Wing and Star Wars Armada and some of the other ones that involve tactical spaceship play, Battleship Galaxies, etc. You might be used to a certain way of playing or some expectations, and I'm here to tell you that Talon sort of thwarts a couple of those expectations. Some of you who played older games, Starfleet battle type games, will probably find this familiar, but some of the newer gamers may not. One of the big things, because you actually have all your information on the board, is you are given these pens. And the first thing you do is you set what's called the power curve. The power curve on ships is explained here. Now these are the heavy cruisers. So I've got 2 heavy cruisers. I'm going to show a little example of play. And so you look on here and you see the heavy cruiser, and their start is 332. That is their power curve. What does that mean? It means that they get 3 action points per round. They can move 3 times per round, and they have a turn radius of 2, which will make more sense once you see an example of it. So you take that and you mark it here on your sheet. You just go, okay, so 332. So this would be for the action, for the These would be for the action. Okay, let's try. 3. Forget it. Let's grab this one and see if that one actually works better. Pop the top. All right, this will be better. All right, 3, 3, 3. All right, one more time. Let's see if we can get. Okay, we're going to take our advanced pen and we're going to write down 3, 3, and 2. And this will be our starting units. Same here. I'm going to go ahead and set the rest of these up so you don't have to see it. And then we're going to get on our merry way in some combat. So before we go any farther, I wanted to actually go over again one of the things I referred to earlier related to the sort of movement or the how things go. In some of the more contemporary games, a lot of times you get these ship attributes and you're like, hey, I've got 3 actions, I got 3 movement and 2 turn, and in your mind you're like, oh, okay, so I can move 3 spaces and I can do 3 actions and I can turn twice and all that. This is a little different. Actually, it's quite a bit different in that the answer to that is yes, you do get to, but you do it a different way. These rounds are important. There's rounds that take place, and in each round you're going to follow through these 6 impulses for each round. Now, what are impulses? Impulses are sort of impulses, little triggers that let people take actions based on their ship attributes. That's a little murky, so let me explain it in more detail. The big thing is that, and you always remember, is that in Talon, your ship, on any impulse, will never, ever move more than 1 space and will never, ever do more than 1 action. And so, well, then how do the attributes matter? Well, they matter like... Well, imagine it's a musical score. It is a space opera, is it not? And in a musical score, you've got a measure. And imagine each round as a measure of 6 times, so 6 beats per measure. So if you have Mr. Talon with his 3-3-2, or Mr. Napoleon with his 3-3-2, then you know that during any round he's going to have 3 impulses when he's going to be able to do some sort of action, any of these available actions. He's also going to have 3 rounds or 3 impulses when he's going to be able to move. So for any measure, you're going to have 3 beats of movement, 3 beats of action, and then all the other impulses he's going to be rest. And so that might be a quirky way to describe it, but that's how it works. And so you will still get three movements per round, 3 actions per round, but you'll do it over the course of these impulses. And if you look at this, you'll see like which impulses it is, and they're pretty well staggered out, like B, D, and F for the 3s and whatever. Obviously, 6 is your best number for being able to do the maximum amount of things per round. And that's how that works. So now let's get into an example of gameplay, and this will all hopefully flesh out and coagulate into a more obvious and more easy to understand example of how Talon plays. Alright, I've set up a 2-on-2 duel that we're ready to begin. We have our Terran ships over here, we have our Terran ships over here, and our Talon ships there, and they're ready to roll. We begin with round 1, impulse 1. The initiative is who gets to go first, and this changes over time based on whether you use your action points to try and garner the ability to change initiative or defend your initiative. That'll become an interesting part later, because whose turn it is first has a big impact on how the battle could go in certain situations, where it's going first could be the difference between saving your ship and watching it explode in space in glorious, glorious array. So, initiative 1. So the first thing we look at and go, okay, 3-3-1, 3-3. Nobody has initiative 4, 5, or 6 on that side. Now, there is one thing that a Talon ship can do, and that is Talon ships have afterburners, and they can use their afterburners to do a movement even when it's not their turn. They get an extra beat. I'm not going to do that, but once used, that's it for the entire engagement. That's a little curious thing about them. 2 is batteries. Terrans get batteries, and what do those batteries do? Those give them, they store up action points for later. So they get to store action points, they get to have extra movement. That's kind of a differentiation. One thing I didn't note was that everybody should be starting with all of their weapons fully charged. I'm going to do that now so you can see how my pen of Mighty Mightiness works. So, with that done, the initiative player had his moment, but there's nothing there with the 4, 5, and 6. Second player, nothing there with the 4, 5, and 6. They're all 3s. So now we go to B, and guess what? There's a 3. So all units respond that have 3. Now, because of the power curve, in this case, whenever they have a chance to do an action, they also have a chance to move because they're both 3. But it is quite common to change the power curve to do less movement, more actions, more movement, less actions. And so it won't always be in lockstep that we see this. So the first thing that the sequence is that if there's any extra shields, they go away. You can spend action points, and that's the first thing you do. And so the action points for this, now he's going to head into this heavy fire. So his action point he's going to use to place an extra shield. What's he going to do that for? Because he's going to put a shield right here in front. Now what does that do? Well, this is the shield. Right now he's got 7 shield. This will give him 8. And this shield will last all the way till the next round, Impulse B, before it gets removed. If it doesn't get removed earlier because of damage that he may take. But he expects that there will be some fire. Then, on this one, we have an option, and this is the available things that you can do. You can well, like I did, reinforce your shield. You can actually charge a yellow bar, which you don't need to do now, which is charging your weapons. Side slip, which might be a perfect thing for him to do. Power through a turn, which is a way to sort of reduce the amount of time you have to wait before you can turn again. Charge a battery, which is something that the Terrans can do. Change initiative, which will then give you give the player who has initiative the opportunity to work first, and then missiles and bases, which we won't quite get into. But then, so here we go. So he is going to do a side slip recommendation there. All right. Now the side slip is placed there during the action phase. It's only when they move that actually takes effect. So with that done, they've spent their AP. Now they move their ships if required, and they are required. So first thing is, what do we move? We're going to move him. Now he has an opportunity. Normally you always move in the direction you're facing, and that's what makes turn radius so powerful. In this case though, this lets you side slip and then you shift over. Now why you shift over? To try and hopefully get him, to work with him to get, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe that was a bad idea. But hey, I showed you side slip, so how bad could that be? And then this one, when you don't have a turn marker out, you can always turn at least one. You turn one direction. The turn radius is not, this number isn't like I turn twice. It's I turn one direction and I move. That's turning. That's it. You do not get to like flip around 180 degrees and do all that crazy stuff. This isn't Top Gun in space. You can't put the brakes on, let them fly right by. So what he will do then is he is going to try to move, well, he could go this way and try to do a pincer move down here, or he can move over there and try to help his buddy, but then that might put him rearward. He's going to do this. He's going to rotate, and he's going to move. That's his movement of space. Now, what happens now? Well, notice that he has a turn radius of 1. So guess what? He cannot turn again at all, and he's going to keep moving until his ship and that turn marker are in the same hex. Only then can he consider his move completed and then be able to turn and move a different direction. So far he's going this way. The Talons have an advantage that their turn radius is pretty tight. It's only one movement space, whereas the Terrans, when they move, it's going to be a different story. So they moved, and then they may fire their ships or fire their weapons if able. This is where it gets interesting. You'll notice the weapons here, and the Terrans have a special weapon that lets them shoot forward and sideways. Forward is this space, and then in a quadrant. These two hexes these are the sides, and then the rear is this and back. So what are they going to do? He's going to fire because he is actually in range of the forward. It looks a little weird like it's to the side, but it's not. It's here and forward. So here and forward. So this is actually in front. And he's going to hit the side because this ship is... Nope, they're both forward. They're both forward. Doesn't matter. So he's going to basically fire his weapons. And at this point, note that any ships may fire if they can. So it doesn't matter whose turn it is or what. Any ships can fire at this last phase. So it doesn't matter what impulse, who has initiative, whatever. The initiative player gets to do their actions and do their movement, but when it's firing time, everybody let's go. So with this weapon happens to be, let me reach over and grab it here. That weapon will be noted here as the Disruptor. In the different ranges, you roll dice to determine what hits, and if it hits, it's just straight up 2 damage. So, he's going to fire this weapon to this front shield, and he has to roll its range of 2. So he's going to have to roll on a range of 2, a 2 to a 6. So this is the optimal range for the Talon's Disruptors. And of course he hits. So what does that mean? Well, 2 damage. Boom, boom. Alright, with that done, now he's gonna do an Alpha Strike. He's gonna fire it all. He's gonna try to shoot again. He's gonna try to shoot this again. He wants to take out that front shield. And again, it's a 5. So now this poor Terran ship is already down to 1/3 of its forward shields. Then, let's see, now this actually could be in range if they want. It actually is surprising. There's some surprising range, but note that at a space of 4, you have to roll a 5 or a 6. 1, 2, 3. So this ship could take a risk, and it could try for a 3 to a 6. So it's actually not bad. It could hit there if it wanted to. It's only going to fire one of its weapons. Oh, a 6, of course. And so it too, now this is on the side. So that's the only reason this could fire is because it has a side arrow, which means that instead of being able to shoot forward, it can shoot forward and to the side. So that means 2 points of damage for the Guderian. But he's not going to fire his other weapon. He's going to keep that one. So now we've emptied out our weaponry. So we take that all off. Goodbye, Talon. Goodbye. And we are done. And that is the end of the first impulse of the 6 impulses per round. So there we go. Yep. So now it is the Terran's turn because they don't have initiative, but they get to go next. So they have opportunities. They too get action points, and it'll be interesting what they want to do. And then they'll get movement same way. So the first thing we're going to do with this is, why did I try that? We're going to go ahead and what action will we use? We're going to enable a side slip for our good friend here because we want to get those forward shields out of the way and maybe see if we can, because we have an opportunity now. Right now he's used all of his weapons, so we don't have to worry about that now, but if we can try and get over and move through, because you can't actually have them land, they can go through each other. The ships the big hexes are lots of space, so the ships, you can't have your own units in the same spot or collide, or they both take 3 damage. Something about near, faster than light, something or other. They had some scientific explanation. But you can have enemies actually be on the same grid, in the grid space. Alright, so there's that. He's going to side slip, and oh wait, you know what I forgot? They could have shot too, but I'm not going to have them shoot. They could have shot on that last impulse if they'd wanted to, since all the opportunity was there, but that's okay, because they can fire now. And they can even be in better position to do so. Maybe. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and do this one. And this one I think we're going to... now we're just going to power up a box, because we have options for later. Alright, they've done their actions. Now they get to do their movement. Side slip means he moves over here, which gets him over to the side shields. Now he can shoot on the side shield. And you'll notice the side shield has less shielding than the front shield, so that could be advantageous. And this is going to... we're going to go ahead and just have it... We're not going to have it turn. We're going to have it just go straight in and move. So it's going to move 1, and then it has a turn radius of 2. So you'll notice that that means that it's not going to be able to turn again until it goes 2 spaces. Alright, and with that, everything gets to fire. Now, we're going to fire this sucker. Now these guys have interesting, because they have torpedoes, or phasers, sorry. And they have antimatter torpedoes? Yes. So we're going to fire a couple things. We're going to fire the phaser here. And the phaser is a little bit of damage, not great, but it'll do something to the side shields. So we're going to basically roll range of 2, 3. So range of 2, roll to 3, 1. So 1 damage to the side shields of our Justice. And then we're going to shoot the torpedo. Antimatter torpedo. At a range of 2, a 2 to 6 will fire it, and it does 4 damage, which is beautiful. And guess what? Sure enough, mission accomplished on that one. 4 damage. 1, 2, 3. And then we start, because we've gotten through the shields, we do hull damage. Hull damage is interesting because the more damage you take, the less power you have at the end of the round, and that can change the amount of actions you get. So this is a penalty. So even if you had like a 3-3-1 and you had this penalty here, the farthest left box or farthest right box tells you how much of a deficit you're going to have to take. So 3 minus 1 would be 2. It'd only be 2 actions. It would become a 2. Also, when you cover these boxes up, you have a roll for critical damage, and that can be any number of things that can happen. One of which is okay, but a lot of which of these is not necessarily good. You don't want to roll a 12. That'll just blow the ship up already. Alright, so we fired those 2. We're not going to fire the rest. We're going to leave those there. Alright, and the same thing over here. Do we want to fire everything? We do. So we're going to fire the first weapon. That's a 5. That's 2 damage. For the... at a range of 1. Yeah, that's 2 damage. Alright, then we're going to fire our torpedo. Well, our torpedo's interesting because you can't hit at a 1, so we don't get to use the torpedo, but that's okay. But we're going to fire this other weapon here and see if we can actually knock out the shields. Yep, we can. So now that shield's gone. That's going to help us later, we hope. If we can get around and put a torpedo in that sucker, that could be pretty amazing. Oh, 2. Alright. Okay, so that's a 2. Alright, pretend that's a 2. Alright, and that's it for the end of Impulse B. Now we're going to do Impulse C and start there again. Alright, so the Terrans, once again, we didn't do any changes to the initiative. We're just going to keep it the way it is. So now the Terrans have an opportunity. Now this is where you can do some things to recharge. As an action, actually no, nobody gets to. Guess what? 2, 4, 5, 6. Nobody has a 3, so we're going to skip there. Unless they want to move. You know what? We're going to use one of our afterburners. I need to get out of here. So we're going to use an afterburner and just go forward. And, yeah, get out of there. See, because the weapon, there we go. So they're gone. Then we won't use the afterburner for him. I think he's got some ideas. All right. So with that, we go to the Terrans, and the Terrans, they don't have, they do have action points boosted up, but they're not going to use them at this time. So then we go to Initiative D, and once again, we have our Terrans, and they have options. Now, one of the things you can do with an action point is start regenerating the weapons that you've exhausted. So we're gonna cross one of these out. Not this one, we'll do this one. So we need to regenerate these and refill them over time. Same thing here. Eventually we're going to need it. Now, they won't be helpful the rest of this round, but it would be nice if we could go into the next round with the shield in a better state. I'll do that later. Alright, so that'll take care of their action points. And then I'm going to just stop there because I think I've explained at least enough of the general idea of how the game goes. It's kind of hard to hold a camera, talk, and try and write at the same time. But there is a couple interesting. When the round is done, you actually go through this step. Pretend that we went through all this round and this was the state we were in. One of the things I did note is that if they wanted to, if the Talon wanted to, instead of recharging one of the shields, they could do what's called powering through a turn, which pulls this one step closer, which means that you can sort of shortchange the turning by squeaking around. And if that were to happen, then instead of having to move, this could pull it in the action phase, and then in the movement phase, it could basically do a normal action again. It's a way to expedite turning if you need to, but it does cost action points that could possibly be useful in other ways. At the end of the round, everybody gets to charge one of the red boxes. Now the red boxes are interesting. They only charge in between rounds. So what does that mean? Practically speaking, it means you can fire these smaller guns every round, but once you fire the missile, you know it's going to be a full 2 rounds before that's charged up. Now the yellow boxes can be charged. If the red boxes are filled at the end of the round, they can be charged up as well. There's some rules on how to charge them, but the yellow boxes can be charged up during the round by using action points. That's a way to speed it up as well. So if you know that you have one of these red boxes filled, you know the round's almost done, and you'll be able to actually get that other second box filled. You might preparatorily use some actions during that round on your impulses to be able to fill up the rest of the yellow bar, so you could be able to just turn around and fire this the minute you get an opportunity. Sorry for the fuzziness, but that's an interesting thing that you get to do. And then certain of the scenarios give you reinforcements if you want to bring those in. There's a retreat option, which we aren't going to do, and then you advance and go, hey, it's round 2 and whatever. And of course the idea is that one of your actions can be used to do a changing of initiative. And so instead of actions, you could say, hey, I want to defend the initiative, which means that when it's their turn, they would have to either use both of their points to like change the initiative or not. Or sometimes if the Talon didn't necessarily care, then maybe the team that doesn't have the initiative would be like, hey, I want to change the initiative, and then it flips it over. So it's possible to get 2 turns in a row, I think, with that. Anyway, that's it for my playthrough. It's not the world's most exciting playthrough, but hopefully it at least explains a little bit about how you're playing, how the game plays in the scenarios, at least the very basic one. Obviously, the longer scenarios and the Empire mode and the campaign are all much, much more detailed with a lot more going on. So anyway, let's get to my final thoughts on Talon. Okay, so final thoughts on Talon. Let's go with the con first, and it's a pretty big one. The pens, these suck. These suck bad. These are garbage. Absolute garbage. I hope that I'm an exception to the rule and everyone else got wonderful, delightful, glorious pens in their box. I did not, and that's not 3 impulses in, not 3 rounds, 3 impulses in. My first pen failed. Not even after the first round, the second pen failed. Now these weren't just dried on, pre-opened ones. This wasn't any sort of like, oh, well, some exceptional rule to happen. These were like brand new, and they just bit it. They were fresh out of the wrapper, unopened, and useless. Now, generally, to be fair, I'm not always very happy with a lot of the write and roll pens. Captain Sonar, Saint, Malo, and then there's a whole proliferation of roll and write games coming out this year. That seems to be all the craze. This predates that craze. They've been okay. I mean, they haven't been great. I get it. In some ways, it's kind of like a printer. You buy a cheap printer on Black Friday, and you know the printer's cheap, and so they're going to give you just enough ink to print 30 pages, and then you're just going to have to go buy more ink. Now, I get that. That's a reasonable trade-off, I think, because you got a cheap printer, etc. We all know that. But this isn't just some ancillary component, some chit, some token that was just left out or hard to see or something. This is like the central component, the central element of your entire game. it requires 100% writing all of the time in the game. I am absolutely kind of boggled that it was so cheap and so worthless to have these pens. Now, the solution is easy. But it does cost me more. I end up went and Amazon has these great pens, if you can see them, recommended by others, that actually does just a fine job. They print standard dry erase markers, what I ended up using, but it really is unfortunate, because I think that they could have done a better job of saying, this is important, we should make sure we have really, really good pens for this game that requires 100% writing. Very unusual, because GMT is so fine at their component quality and stuff. Admittedly, it's an unusual piece to add and whatever, but come on, we can do better than that. I mean, it's like, yeah, you need these things. These are the fuel for your game, you know? Like, you know, take us to work, number 2. No can do, sir. Why not? We're out of fuel. Anyway, but that's the con. Now let's get into the pros and whether the game is worth it. Okay, well, with the con aside, let's talk about the game itself. This game is an absolute gem. Not only is it a gem, it is a dazzling gem, and it's a gem that it's a gem on 2 fronts. First off, there's the vintage throwback to a kinder, gentler, more civilized age, when you had games that really kind of just imbued themselves, not because of the flashy, plastic, highly detailed miniatures, etc., but because the gameplay was the richness of the game. It was the embodiment of the style and pizzazz of miniatures and whatever. It basically harkens back to simple gaming at its finest, where we didn't have plastique was not such a mass market staple of these types of games. It takes a relatively few and bare set of just ship tokens and just a few counters. When you really look at it, it's just a few counters, and it just takes a nondescript space board. Like, you know, it's setting you up to go, this could be droll, and then it proceeds to create this space opera feel of a game, the likes of which we just rarely see anymore. The battles are slow and fast. In that, I mean that it's slow and that you can imagine yourself just trying to eke out a faster turn radius to wheel around in space and line up for a strike on an opponent just right. It's exhausting in all the right ways. You're just, if I just position and all that, becomes so much more relevant than even, like, you know, the X-Wing, the modernized X-Wing kind of style games, which are great in their own right, but this just sets itself apart. It just does. The turns are fast in that you don't have to wait a long time. You don't have your civilization moves, my civilization moves, yours. No, it's like you have your impulse, I have my impulse. We jockey, we position. We're like going back and forth. In some ways, it's jockeying and shifting, ebbing and flowing, jabbing and punching. It's kind of like Mike Tyson's Punch Out in space sometimes. It feels like that. It feels like Wing Commander meets Freelancer meets Homeworld, if that can be imagined. I'm using all digital game terms, but that's how I feel when I play it. And 2, it's not just a vintage throwback, it's also a forward-thinking toolkit that opens the door up for near limitless future expansion, to be honest with you. The campaign, which in a moment of rare attention and detail, actually veers away from that classic tried and true, aka droll, good and evil, Empire Rebellion, me, you. It's, dare I say, almost kind of a love story to space opera. It's not trite. It's possessed with political and cultural and futuristic kind of real world drama. And this is just the scenarios. That's just the scenarios. That's even just like the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's basically your basic cable package, and then you throw in other things. You throw in the situational missions, you know, where you get to try different things, escort missions, capture the kind of stuff. Basically, tantamount to first-person shooter game modes, where you get all these game modes, and you get to just throw yourself at it and see what happens. And those you can tap into. You've got Space Empires 4 integration, where it can be the actual place you do your battles for Space Empires 4. The more grand tactical game that offered by the same designer. There's Empire mode, which you don't even touch on, which is basically where you purchase units and then you go through this sort of like quasi like Empire map in space, and you're fighting over fronts for control and resources, and you gain and lose. I mean, and that's not, I didn't even touch on that level of the game. In some ways, it's almost like MacGyver-like savvy, where it can take what appears to be nearly nothing for pieces and whatever, and then it just transforms it into this kind of ultimate space gaming system, I guess, for want of a better term. And even the box itself, even with all that's included, it's still just a smattering of the potential that this game and this game system has. It's I can see full-fledged campaigns being drawn out with this. Imagine like The Expanse, that sci-fi series, and just something like that, which I know there's a board game for Expanse, but I mean, think of this in those terms. Full more Empire modes, like grander modes, all the way up to maybe Space Empires 4 like level, but then maybe they just want to use Space Empires 4. More ships and more weapons. Lordy, this needs more ships and more weapons. I mean, these are great, but man, the potential is just crazy to be able to build this stuff out. And honestly, for all those things, you don't even need to wait that long, because Talon 1000, the next expansion, is on the horizon and will be here pretty darn soon. So thoughts on that. But yeah, so this is a crazy good game. I waited a little while to open it and get going because I wanted to really dive in and enjoy it, and I was not in the slightest bit disappointed. A lot of thought and care and detail and love and attention, and just really immersing into the storyline. Most of the time you play these games, you're like, okay, flavor text, yeah, okay, now let's play the game. This one, it's like, no, it really is engrossing. I really like how they've woven story and lore very consistently in with all the modes of the game. So, I mean, I know out there we have X-Wing and Armada to close up. We have lots and lots of games that do a lot of fun and sort of like, I really like X-Wing. I like Armada. I like those. They're flashy, bright, solid games in their own right, but I mean, this game isn't driven to have to follow lore and mainstream expectations. It creates its own story. It creates its own style. It borrows mechanics from the past and uses them well, and uses them to great effect. In some ways, I dream of a metagame. Imagine if you had Space Empires 4X for your strategic level, and then you had Talon for your tactical level, and then you had like Space Cadets Away missions for a ground mission level, and then you put it all together to create this epic space opera game that would take you years to finish and would feel just so cool. Anyway, whether or not that actually gets manifested, I can say absolutely firmly that having sniffed all 8 of my markers, I am heavily inspired to continue playing this perpetual masterpiece for many, many years to come. An excellent job again by Jim Crone, and I'm looking forward to more and more and more of this delightful and awesome game. If you want something that's just going to really just feel great as a space game, and that you can play with 2 players and just enjoy the heck out of, this fix the pen problem and you have no downsides. So once again, Talon, highly recommended. I'd give it an 8.5 right now out of 10. I'm looking forward to many, many, many cozy nights with it. So on that, thanks again for joining us on Harebrained Games, and we'll see you next time.